What looked like the end for the caterpillar was just the beginning for the butterfly. I was born in 1946 in the northeast section of Washington, D.C., right across the district line in Maryland, a little town called Fairmont Heights, Maryland, which was really a subdivision because it was close to third world. It was houses there that didn't have indoor plumbing. People had to use outhouses. A lot of people had to draw water from the wells. We lived modestly at 709 59th Avenue, Fairmont Heights, Maryland. My mother worked for the Department of Interior, federal government. My father come from a two-parent family. My father worked at the Naval Gun Factory, and he had a part-time job in a liquor store. And from that liquor store, it really impacted our family because we were exposed to a lot of abuse at an early age. And I was getting good grades in school, but there was always comments on my report cards where my parents had to come up to see about me because I had a bad attitude, I had a behavior problem. But one thing I remember as a kid, born in 1946, around 1956, 46, 56, there were guys in our neighborhood that drove Cadillacs, had the pretty women, and on Saturdays they used to go to the Elks' home, and we used to see their cars coming through the neighborhood, and we'd be playing car lane hopscotch to get to their car doors and be the first one to open it. And whoever got there first, they would throw a coin up in the air and grab it out. And one day, we used to play That's My Car, and I claimed a Cadillac, probably in 1957. But one thing that caught me, the driver had a diamond ring off and looked like that sparkle burst right in my psyche. And I was consumed with the power of fascination. We moved from that community because my father had hit a street lottery number. They call it hitting the number, hit the lottery. And we moved to a subdivision in Fort DuPont, southeast Washington, D.C. It was a somewhat middle-class neighborhood. And I went to an elementary school. I got put back from the seventh grade to the sixth grade because leaving Maryland, going to the district, with the test I took, I wasn't really qualified for the seventh grade. So I had to repeat the sixth grade. And I was the only black, African-American, Negro at that time in my classroom. One thing I didn't suffer was from the pangs of inferiority because the school teachers that I came up with, most of my siblings, I was the youngest of four kids, and most of us went through elementary school with most of the same teachers. And they didn't just teach Negro history once a week. Back then it was only for a week. They taught it all year long. So when I went to this predominantly white school, I kind of knew who I was. And from there, but the same thing that I found out, and I look back and notice about those people that used to have the wells, what's in the well will come up in the bucket. And we carried ourselves with us when we moved to that new location. Same behavior, same morals, same values, nothing changed. Only thing changed was the location. One of the funny things that struck me was the fact when we left that house, we had moved like clothes all that week. And on the last moving day, I asked my mother, I said, "Where's the truck for the furniture?" She said, "Boy, get in the car, we're leaving that junk here." And so going through the sixth grade, went to the seventh grade, and when I went to the seventh grade, the same thing, bad attitude, behavior problem. I went through a social adjustment class. Today, I think they would call that social adjustment class an alternative school. And one of the things about in that social adjustment class, one of the things about that social adjustment class, all of us suffered from this. And this is what this new study has revealed in the last couple of years. Harvard doctors have coined the term hood disease to describe a complex form of post-traumatic stress syndrome threatening the well-being of inner-city youth, report the youth. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimated that nearly 30% of the U.S. inner-city youth are afflicted by this disorder, which makes it difficult for them to learn. Those who exhibit this disorder often live in virtual war zones, the Center for Disease Control said. The doctors at Harvard recently coined the name hood disease, a term for a more complex form of PhD. The news sites report, and since the youth are rarely escape their communities, unlike soldiers who eventually leave a war zone, they are repeatedly exposed to trauma. And I say that because when we hear the term hood itself, coupled with a hood disease, and I sold real estate, I'll get back to that part, what do you think happens to the property value there? So I'm in the social adjustment class. All of us had the same commonality of experiences, behavior problems, bad attitude. And not long after that, I started going into juvenile institutions. And in my 9th grade year, I did manage to graduate with the rest of my class because my academics was never that far off. And another thing that happened, you know, my father was an alcoholic. He was a functioning alcoholic. There was still a lot of love there. And I'll never forget, he changed the course of my life. He asked me, he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I told him, I said, I want to be a barber. He said, why do you want to be a barber? I said, because I think barbers are some real cool guys. I mean, they got their white jackets and they hang out washing their car, and they ladies' men. So about 2 weeks later, he brought home a home barbering kit. He asked me to cut his hair. I said, I don't know how to cut. He said, here to go to blades, I'm gonna show you how to do it and what blades to use. And I cut his hair, and he looked in the mirror, and like I said, with his incongruent behavior, I was kind of frightened. He looked back at me. He said, boy, you can't cut hair. He said, I'm gonna make you my barber, and if I was you, I'd end up making all your friends customers. And I went on to do that and ended up going to a vocational high school, Phelps Vocational High School, enter into the barbering class. The next year, all the guys were driving pretty cars and their families' cars and their fathers. I asked my father, I said, Dad, let me use your car. He said, you can't use my car. I said, why not? He said, no, I don't do that. He said, I'll tell you what, if you pass your barber's test, I'll sign for you a car. And right today, I know the anatomy, I know all the nervous system. Man, I took that book home and I became the youngest licensed barber in Washington, D.C. And now you're looking at a behavior problem, a bad attitude, and now mobile. So the crimes escalated from petty larceny to grand larceny to checks to all the way, it eventually ended up to, I entered a bank with a note and stuck the teller up. She gave me about $3,500. This was in 1969. I made bond. The district jail was so crowded that they was, they didn't even consider it a nonviolent crime at that time because it wasn't a weapon never shown. So I ended up making bond, but I had to go to a halfway house. I ended up leaving the halfway house and went on the road. I took my show on the road and ended up in Patterson, New Jersey in a street robbery. And I got sentenced to 7 years there, and I came back to the district for sentencing. So with a total, I had over 20 years sentence. And my barber's license was an escort, because when I got to Trenton State Prison, I ended up with a job in quarantine where whoever came into that prison at that time had to get a bald head and all of the facial hair cut off of them. And I was the barber that, for years, that cut everyone's head a step across that threshold in Trenton State Prison. I'm talking about corrupt mayors, head mafia guys, and not only was the barber's license and my barber's trade my escort, it allowed me to get around the prison. And one day I was up trading books with some friends on 7-Up. 7-Up is a wing where all of the real gangster type guys, I mean, this 7-Up, if you don't know nobody up there, you don't even go up there. 7-Up is where Hurricane Reuben Carter locked. I was arrested in the same town that he came out of. So I'm trading books, and on my way down the tier, I see a guy happening to looking at a guy's cell, because I thought I heard someone call me, and I looked in his cell, and he had 3 chessboards set up. And I'm staring, looking in the cell, and he must have heard me. And he turned around, he said, "Brother, you got a problem?" Looking in a guy's cell in prison is like home invasion. I said, "Brother, forgive me." I said, "I'm just wondering why you need 3 chessboards set up." He said, "Do you play?" I said, "Yes. Yes, I play." He said, "Well, what opening do you use?" I said, "Opening? I just play." So he kind of looked at me, he said, "No, the reason why I got 3 chessboards set up is because what I'm doing is I'm going through my chess repertoire." You know, he said, "See, one thing you got to understand about chess, that it has a lot to do with life, the parallels life." He said, "These 3 chessboards," he said, "chess is a game of 3 stages. There's an opening, there's a middle, and there's an end game." He said, "The best players see their end game while they're in the opening." He said the same thing about kids that see their end game while they're in their young age. Some kids already know that they're going to take over their parents' business at an early age. You very seldom see them kids get off track. He said, "What you need to understand is chess is a game that can't be lost. You don't win or lose in chess. All you do is learn lessons or you teach lessons." He turned that cell into a classroom. That brother embraced me. He gave me so much knowledge and understanding about the game that it changed my whole worldview. And before I left that prison, he was my mentor. I ended up, from Trenton, I ended up going to Lewisburg federal prison to finish the sentence for the bank robbery. I was probably the best chess player there. Everybody that came in that could even think about playing, they sent them to me. I won a lot of cigarettes for the DC guys. So what happened when I came home, I ended up really getting my life together. I had one thing that happened, and I'm gonna go back over this real fast. While I was in the barbershop, here's what a lot of people don't understand. While I was in that barbershop during the Civil Rights Movement, which was a big time in the African American community, no one never thought about what happened to the barbers when everybody was trying to grow afro. This was one of the bad decisions that I made. Instead of taking the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding I had about passing tests, because the barber's test was one of the most difficult tests you could pass. I could have went to the fire department. I could have went to Amtrak. I could have passed just about any test there was, but I chose to go to the street. I made a bad decision that caused me a lot of time. So when I ended up leaving Lewisburg, and at that time, that's when drugs and alcohol, that was the gateway for the drugs and alcohol. And over 30 years of addiction. When I came out, I ended up going to a 12-step program. And I kind of really got my life together to the point where I became responsible. And one of the things that really helped me was this guy in prison. He told me, he asked me, he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Eugene Brown. I'm the barber in one right." He said, "No, but who are you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He held up a king. He said, "I'm going to tell you something. You're the king. Until you accept your kingship, you're going to keep coming back to prison." And that was a startling statement that echoed in my mind for years and years and years. A lot of things, a lot of decisions that I thought I was making to please other people, I found out that I learned responsibility from that one statement. And I went on to teach kids chess. So from the statement that he made and from the parallels that I had been able to put together, I have a program now at Raleigh Central Prison, North Carolina, on death row. These guys said that if chess can help them in the position that they're in, it should be everywhere. They said, why don't you take this message and take it to many prisons as you can? And this is what I've been doing for the last couple of years. I've taught kids in juvenile institutions, central prison, have a program now in 4 federal prisons with a curriculum that's using chess as one of the main modules for decision making. This is the chess house that I invested in when I came home. I got put out of the school system because after we won 4-year city champion, and they was trying to give me a job, and I put, have you ever been arrested? I said, no. And finally, when they wanted to pay me, and I went downtown, they took my fingerprints. They found out I had been, they escorted me out. And as a direct result of that, they said, well, you can no longer work here. And I ended up buying this house. I was a real estate agent. I was going to flip it, but the parents wouldn't let me. They said, Mr. Brown, these kids depend on you. What are you going to do? I said, I'll tell you what, we're going to make this out of the chess house. Out of the direct result of that chess house, we won 4-year city champions. Took kids to the nationals 5 times. And these kids right today, some of them, we started in 1991, 92, some of these kids right today are in college, out of college. One of the things that I use for a paradigm shift is to let them know, say, you can be anything that you want to be. They say, ask me, say, what do you want to be, Mr. Brown? Mr. Brown, I said, well, how about I can sell drugs for a living. They say, what? I said, yeah, I can sell drugs. We talking about a paradigm shift. They said, how can you do that, Mr. Brown? I said, let me tell you one thing. You can go to school and be a pharmacist and sell drugs all day long. And that was the first time they ever heard anything like that. The think before you move comes from a brother that's a leading poet in Washington, and he seen what I was doing, and he saw that motto. And I carry this motto with me everywhere I go. And he gave me a poem that I embellish, and it makes so much sense that I put it to memory, and it goes like this. This is the story of a chess club, founded for inner city youth. It's different from most, it's distinguished and boasts of not just teaching chess, but truth. It teaches young children to reason, to rationalize, to use good sense and intelligence against deception, treachery, and lies. So at the Big Chair Chess Club, we're on a mission to save the lives of our children, to teach the unteachable, reach the unreachable, and always think before you move. Thank you.